Hey guys, I really was not planning to jump on the bandwagon of all the Charlie Kirk related videos. But I decided that I am going to put together a brief video. Well, that's the intention, anyways. You guys know me and how my videos tend to get long. Um, but there's some things that I want to say and put out there because I want to see justice done and I want to see these things come to a conclusion. And that does mean that there's all manner of questions around Charlie Kirk's murder that need to be addressed. And if they just, tell us that it was a lone shooter and that's it, and sort of, wash their hands of the situation, that's not the whole story. And we know that's not the whole story. And we're not going to be satisfied with that. And and the reason I'm putting together this video is pretty early on after the assassination. I started digging around to try to find out what happened. And even though I'm not on social media, I didn't have to dig very much to find out a vast amount of information because in the internet age, people are just very good at digging things up. And once they've dug it up, they're very good at making it accessible to people. And so, well, there's a lot of intentional misinformation that was put out very early on, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I was able to sift through that, and then there was a great deal of information that was put out about how there were a lot of trans people who had foreknowledge of this murder, going back as far as a month in advance, and and really this was a conspiracy. This was, and I posted some things here and there about how it was basically a militant trans group, some of whom were members of a rifle club and enjoyed firearms, and they had conspired to kill Charlie Kirk, and a lot of people were sending a lot of flack my way for saying that. Because at that point in time, none of that stuff had made it into the mainstream yet. But slowly, as time goes on, these things are leaking out, and people are becoming more and more aware. And so I decided I need to put this out there to help raise that awareness, because we want answers to what happened here, and we want to see justice done. And at this point, there are probably 7 or 8 individuals involved. This was a conspiracy to kill Charlie Kirk. It was. And this really shouldn't surprise us. Here's a little bit of scriptural background on this stuff. So the title of this video is going to be, Did a Militant Trans Death Cult Conspire to Kill Charlie Kirk? And it sounds like something absolutely insane from another world. It sounds like something from fiction or from fantasy. But the reality is that conspiracies are very real, and there have been conspiracies in the past to kill Jesus and kill his followers, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. It's not surprising to see these things happen when God's people speak truth, and they speak it in an open and courageous and public way. Sometimes that rubs evil people the wrong way, and we do live in a world that is under Satan's dominion, and I do believe that Satan stirred up his people to reach out and take Charlie Kirk's life and to silence his voice. And I believe that the Lord allowed it to happen because Charlie Kirk's ministry, voice, and influence are going to be magnified greatly through this. And the gospel is going to go forth and triumph. That's always what happens in persecution. Christians, when we're persecuted historically, don't bury our heads in the sand. It scatters the Christian people, sure, and that just causes the gospel to go further abroad. And that's my hope and prayer for this situation as well, that the Lord will comfort Charlie Kirk's family, but also that the Lord will use us to magnify his message and to bring souls to himself, and bring a much needed revival to the young people of this country and the West. And I believe that some of that is starting to happen, and I think that's a really positive thing. And I'm delighted to see the Lord bring some good things out of these terrible events that happened last week. Well, let's talk about these conspiracies that took place in the past. So we're going to first go to John 11, where there was a conspiracy of Jewish religious leaders to kill Jesus. And we're going to start in John 11, verse 47, and I'm just going to read a little bit here. It says here, "Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council, and said, What do we? For this man," speaking of Jesus, "doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, Ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man, Jesus, should die for the people, that the whole nation perish not. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus should die for that nation. And not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered abroad. Then from that day forth they took counsel together for to put him to death. Jesus therefore walked no more openly among the Jews, but went thence unto a country near to the wilderness, into a city called Ephraim, and there continued with his disciples." So here we see the Jewish religious leaders of Jesus' day, and they hated him. They hated Jesus because he was a very humble man of low birth, he was a laborer, son of a carpenter, and the things that he was God in human form. We know this as believers. And the things that he was teaching was just confounding the man-made teachings of the Jewish religious leaders and these different sects that had arisen within Judaism, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and so forth. And the miracles that Jesus did showed clearly that God's hand of approval was upon him and upon his ministry. And they knew if they left Jesus alone that he was going to continue taking the preeminence from them and making them look foolish, and that it was going to take the nation in a direction that they had other plans. So they decided that they were going to kill Jesus. And Jesus was crucified on the cross as a result of a Jewish conspiracy of the religious leaders. That's what happened. They rejected their own Messiah, the promised one of God that God sent to them. And that's very tragic. So this sort of thing is not unheard of. A conspiracy to kill God's evangelist, God's spokesperson, especially when there was great success on Jesus' ministry. He was raising the dead, he was healing the sick, he was curing incurable diseases, and Satan's kingdom hated that. Satan's kingdom always hates believers when we are encroaching on his territory and making headway against him and reclaiming souls from spiritual darkness. And I believe that that's what Charlie Kirk was doing, going on these college campuses where indoctrination and propaganda are being pushed on students, being brainwashed and pressed into a socialist, communist, anti-God, leftist mold. And Charlie Kirk was going into that environment and winning young hearts and minds and helping these young people to see truth and to understand just how they had been blinded by the system. And so I do believe that just as in Jesus' day, that there was a conspiracy to kill Charlie Kirk. Now let's talk about the conspiracy to kill Paul. This is from Acts 23. Acts chapter 23, and starting in verse 12. "And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And there were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy." And the Bible actually uses that word, calls it a conspiracy. "And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, We have bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul." And these people were literally lying in wait, setting up ambushes, because I believe that Paul at this point in time was he was in the custody of the Romans, and so they were looking for an opportunity when they were going to basically prisoner transport, moving him from one Roman facility to another. They were looking for an opportunity to lie in wait and ambush. They were so rabid to kill Paul that they were willing to go up against the Romans in order to do that. and it was really a death pact. They vowed that they will eat nothing until they've slain Paul. They're basically saying either we're going to kill him or we're going to die. We're going to die trying. Now let's go to John. So again, we see here that Paul preaching the gospel, and Satan's kingdom hates that. And this shouldn't surprise us to see Christian martyrdom. That's what happened to Charlie Kirk. He was a Christian martyr. He's the first public Christian martyr in the United States, I believe. Now, that's not to say that he's the first, period. I know for a fact that other Christians here in this country have been killed for their faith before, but it was done in a much less open manner. The killing of Charlie Kirk was hateful and vindictive, and it was done in front of his family. It was done to send a message: quit pushing back against us and against our agenda. And it was done in a very open way to send a message. And by the way, for that reason, I do reject the conspiracy theories that that Israel took him out, and that it was Mossad because he had begun questioning some of the things that Israel has been doing lately. So understand this: Israel's had enough. They've been attacked for many decades by various groups in the Holy Land, and they have decided that they're going to start reshaping things the way they see fit, and they're not asking permission anymore. They're just going to do it, and then I guess ask for forgiveness after the fact. And to be clear, Israel as a state, they are doing some things that are pretty heinous and probably illegal according to international law and so forth. And yeah, more and more believers and just people in general are starting to question what's going on over there. I do believe the Jewish people are God's chosen people. I do believe that He is not done with them yet, and we'll see a revival there before the end times. Before the millennial kingdom on earth. But that being said, Israel is a secular state. Judaism has gotten very far from God, and there's some rotten things going on there. That's just the way it is. And Charlie Kirk, as with many people, was becoming increasingly aware of this and increasingly outspoken against it. And so some people are saying that Mossad silenced him. I don't think that's the case, though. It's just not Mossad's modus operandi. This open, vindictive kind of killing. If Mossad wanted somebody dead, they would do it very quickly, very efficiently, and probably make it look like an accident, and that would just be the end of it. And as we'll see anyway, there's a lot of trans people that had foreknowledge of Charlie Kirk's murder, and anyway, as I said, I reject the conspiracy theory that the Israelis silenced him. No, it's actually a bit more shocking than that, what happened here. But this shouldn't surprise us. There are verses in the scriptures, and we're going to look at a few of them here. John 13:16 says this: Verily, verily, I say unto you, this is Jesus speaking, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. We Christians are little Christs. Jesus is our Savior, Jesus is our example, Jesus is our leader. And we're called to be, we're called to be little Christs. So Christian is a word that other people started calling the believers because they were trying to be little Christs, and it was a derogatory term, but it stuck because it is what we're called to be. We are called to be little Christs. It wasn't a name that we came up for ourselves, but Christians, the early Christian church, kind of embraced it once people started calling them this. Yes, we are Christians. That's our purpose. And just as Jesus was persecuted and hated, so we will be persecuted and hated if we speak the truth as well. And that's what happened here with Charlie Kirk. A death cult conspiring to kill a believer is nothing new. This has happened before. And I dare say it will happen again as society gets worse and worse. John 15:18, if the world hate you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. Again, Jesus speaking. If you were of the world would love his own, but because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. Remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they've kept my saying, they'll keep yours also. So, we can expect similar things to what Jesus experienced. There are going to be a few who listen. There are going to be a few who turn back from darkness and sin and embrace Jesus as Lord and Savior. But then there's going to be a lot that hate us for speaking the truth too. John 15:25. But this cometh to pass that the word might be fulfilled that is written in their law, they hated me without a cause. Jesus Christ didn't do anything wrong that he should be so hated and reviled by the Jewish leaders of his time. And Charlie Kirk, all he did was share his beliefs with others. He never did any harm to anyone. And look how hated he is. Look how his words are taken and twisted out of context, just like they did with Jesus Christ. And just like with Jesus, they killed him before his time. They killed Charlie Kirk in his early 30s, 31, I believe he was. And they killed Jesus at the age, I believe, of 33, is what's generally accepted, before his time, because darkness hates light. And, I can't say authoritatively that when Charlie Kirk stands before Jesus, Christ will say to him, well done, thou good and faithful servant, but I strongly suspect that that's the greeting that Charlie's going to get. And we know from the scriptures that the martyred saints are before God's throne day and night, begging for vindication. And one day God promises he will answer that plea. The Heavenly Father has been watching humanity and all the evil things that people do to each other in darkness and under cover of darkness. He's been watching it all since the beginning. And he's been storing up wrath for the day of wrath. And no evildoer is going to get off the hook. And if they don't receive enough punishment for their crimes here on earth, they're going to be before that great white throne one day, and God's going to balance the books. God is going to speak for his martyred saints. But one thing that I can say right now is that Charlie Kirk is with his Savior. And I never met him in real life. I had the privilege of watching a lot of his stuff. Since I'm into Bible apologetics and also a little bit current events and politics and things like that, I liked Charlie Kirk. He was a nice guy. He was a good guy. He seemed to truly be trying to model his faith for his family and for society and for young people. And he wanted to see people, especially young people, come out of the purposelessness that our educational system stamps on people. Just a lot of young people have no purpose. They have no hope. They live lives of despair, and the only thing they have is hedonism, and which is the rampant and uncontrolled pursuit of pleasure and experience, because they don't have anything else. There's nothing that they're living for. And Charlie was trying to point them to the answer of life, Jesus Christ, being reconciled with our Creator. And for that he was hated, and for that ultimately he was killed. He was a Christian martyr. Now, I want to talk about a few things. So early on, like I said, I did kind of a deep dive in that first day and kind of came away with the core information of what was going on. And there was a lot of disinformation being put out. For example, early on, an account with 5 million followers on X posts a fake photo of the suspect, Tyler Robinson, wearing a Trump shirt, and quietly follows up in a thread with the real photo. So here's the real photo of this fellow, Tyler Robinson, and they photoshopped it to make it look like he was a Trump Republican, which doesn't make any logical sense at all. Why would a Trump Republican shoot Charlie Kirk? They would have been best buddies. In other words, there's just this information or disinformation campaign, rather, to attempting to muddy the waters and confuse things. And honestly, I believe that this is criminal. This is obfuscation. This is interference in an investigation. I think there should be criminal charges for the people who did this. This is unacceptable. There seems to be a coordinated effort right now to spread as much fake information as possible to label the alleged Kirk assassin as a far-right Trump supporter. So I watched a really interesting, I believe it was with Redacted News on YouTube. It was an interview between Redacted, Clayton Morris, and Kyle Seraphin, I believe, who is a former Secret Service, if I recall correctly. I might have that wrong. It might have been an interview. It was with Kyle Seraphin, this interview that I watched. And he had a lot of really interesting insights into things and what was going on behind the scenes. And we'll talk a little bit about some of that. Actually, let's talk about that a little bit right now. So Kyle Seraphin was talking about how Kash Patel interjected the FBI into things. And he did this probably in order to curry favor with Donald Trump, because Kash Patel is kind of on the outs, according to Kyle Seraphin. And so he's looking for a win. But really, this whole situation with Charlie Kirk being murdered, it wasn't an FBI jurisdiction type of scenario at all. So the FBI interjects itself into this situation and arrests a couple people really early on, only to have to release them later and say, oops, no, we got the wrong guy. And it looks like what was happening there was that Patel was trying to get a quick and early win on this so that he could kind of have a victory to be able to, put in his resume, I guess, even though this really wasn't his jurisdiction. And Seraphin was saying that really what happens is this just gets worked at the ground level of law enforcement. You have, forensics, and you have investigators going through stuff online and just checking up on everyone's connections to each other, communications, evidence at the scene, and all this other stuff. And it's just, normal law enforcement work from the ground up. And the FBI didn't really need to be involved in that at all. So the FBI's involvement just added a lot of confusion. And really all this is being handled, for the most part, he says, most likely at the state level. That's why you have the governor also interjecting stuff about this situation, and the governor is also trying to confuse things, unfortunately. We'll talk about that a little bit as well towards the end. And so it's kind of confusing, and that has affected and altered the flow of information, and how the investigation and the information available to the public has trickled out, if that makes sense. And I was posting stuff online about how there's this cell of trans individuals. I counted four individuals that had foreknowledge and had some links to this trans rifle club. And then this fellow who ended up, or at least he's the one that they're saying was the shooter, although there was another individual trans person. I'm not going to say their name, but I'll just say that they were a teacher. There was some really interesting connections between this trans rifle group and other people just hating Charlie Kirk and saying they want him dead. There was a song, there's an album released online on the internet, a music album. There was a song in this album apparently with the title Charlie Kirk Dead at 31. There was another song title Charlie Kirk's Death Is Not Enough For Me. I'm not going to go into the names of these trans individuals in great detail. I will read, we will skim through this some of these articles that I have on this subject, and if their usernames and stuff come up, so be it. But I'm not personally going to go out of my way to mention their names or anything, as this is all kind of ongoing stuff. But I personally was able to identify about 4 different individuals that had foreknowledge. Other sleuths online have concluded that there's as many as 6 trans individuals who had foreknowledge and coordinated and had a part in this. And then if we also include the shooter, who is not trans, but he is homosexual most likely, and we include someone who seems like they were trying to be an intentional decoy at the scene, potentially there's as many as 8 people or more who were involved in this conspiracy. And so when the governor is trying to say it was just a lone shooter, it was just a lone shooter, he's a liar, and he's running interference for these people, and he's probably doing it intentionally for political reasons, because even though he's a Republican, the governor of Utah is someone who Charlie Kirk criticized him, especially because the governor, despite being a Republican, was in favor of men being in women's bathrooms and stuff like that, and very pro-trans in a lot of his policy. So this is a pretty far-reaching conspiracy, and there's a lot of really interesting little details to it. So keep your eyes peeled and see, is the media and the establishment, are they going to tell us the truth about this stuff? Now, at this point, I believe President Trump himself has mentioned that the alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, was living with a roommate slash lover who was a trans man, a trans person, a man trying to become a woman. So that actually, I guess, would be a trans woman. But basically, I'm just going to say it was a transgender person. It's actually a man. So if it is true, therefore, that Tyler Robinson and this person, if they indeed were lovers, then Tyler Robinson, normal as he looks, is a homosexual. Not a flaming homosexual, but a homosexual. Anyway, and there's just all manner of weird little details and strange things associated with this. For example, there's a book published on Amazon. It went live on it went live a day before Charlie Kirk was murdered, and it was about his. I mean, look at the title: "The Shooting of Charlie Kirk: A Comprehensive Account of the Utah Valley University Attack, the Aftermath, and America's Response, September 9th, 2025." And as people have pointed out, I believe it was, what's that guy's name? Alex Jones, InfoWars. I believe it was him who pointed this out initially, and this is some really weird stuff. But people in discussing this point out there is a review process for putting stuff up on Kindle, and it can take days or longer. So somebody knew about this well in advance, and now we have information that suggests that there was foresight of the killing going back weeks, if not a month, prior. And so basically, whoever this person is, this person needs to be investigated because they're looking to profit off of his death. They wanted to get their book out there first, and then they updated it on September 11th. Probably what they were doing was they put down a base book that most likely had the plan of the assassination, how it was supposed to play out, and then they updated it with the facts after the fact of how everything actually did play out. That's what I believe is happening here. So the book is live on the 9th, and then after he's murdered, it gets edited. That is real interesting. And this person, Anastasia J. Casey or whatever, needs to be investigated, because they obviously had some foreknowledge that Charlie Kirk was going to be murdered. I don't remember where it was that I found out that some of these trans individuals are involved in a rifle club and are shooting enthusiasts. So this guy, Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter, he was described as by his co-workers as being just kind of a pretty dead, kind of quiet, lifeless individual, generally speaking, but when they would talk about firearms, he was very enthusiastic about that, and he was very proud of being a marksman and would talk about these. I think one of the shots he took was maybe like 400 something yards, and in keeping with that, let me just mention that as someone who likes guns myself and grew up hunting, and there have been many vets and law enforcement people who've weighed in at this point, a 200-yard shot is not a long shot, not at all. With a good rifle, and good form from a prone position, clear line of sight to the target, nothing in between, easy shot. And this guy was someone who apparently enjoyed shooting anyways and was doing shooting at longer distances than 200 yards. But then there's other of these trans individuals who are part of this trans rifle club. At this point, considering what's happened and this conspiracy to kill Charlie Kirk, I don't think that we can conclude that their involvement with firearms is harmless or innocent. I mean, there's nothing wrong with guns. I love guns. I love target shooting. Um, I don't really do much hunting anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, these people unfortunately took that and have used it for evil. And, all right. So we talked about, oh yeah. So apparently, I didn't dig into this in great detail myself, but apparently there were also mainstream media news articles that, online news articles that were, so I guess when these news articles are published, they can do something where it gets published, but it's not visible right away, and then it becomes visible at a certain point. Well, people were coming up with these news articles about Charlie Kirk's death, where they also were posted, put up before he died, and then they didn't go live until later on. So how high does this go? Were there powers connected to the media or state actors who were controlling and manipulating these trans individuals who were the actual ground level cell that planned and carried out the murder? Did they have mentors within the deep state that were interfacing with these trans kids? And I say kids, but they're all many of them seem to be like 20 somethings. There's a lot of questions that this situation has opened up, and there's a lot of things that need to be. We need answers. We need answers. So the Gateway Pundit's been doing a great job of running details as they emerge, and unfortunately, in a situation like this, there's stuff is changing very rapidly. But I'll just read the title of this. Transgender social media users posting hints of foreknowledge and suspicious out-of-state visitors at alleged Kirk assassin's home raise serious terror network concerns. I call it a militant trans death cult. They call it here terror network. Charlie Kirk's murder was definitely an act of terror, for sure. I'm not going to read this whole article. If you're interested, you can dig in for yourself. I'll just kind of go through and I don't think it's a coincidence either that Charlie Kirk was being asked about trans shooters over the last 10 years when he was killed. And by the way, I'm going to point something out here. I'm going to point a couple things out here. So I live in Tennessee. There's the Nashville shooter who was trans, went into a private school and killed some children in there. And that whole situation, I did actually look into that, and I do have a lot of more information than what has been made publicly available in the news media about what was going on in that situation. Unfortunately, with any of these situations, as stuff gets scrubbed. A lot of these trans individuals have removed their social media at this point, deleted stuff online that was there previously. There's a Pinterest page that was it was a tactical page with gear and guns and stuff like that, but it was in like a trans style, for lack of a better way to put it, and that page was removed. It makes it hard to retrace steps of investigation, especially for someone like me who's jumping all over the place and not necessarily documenting as I go. But in the case of the Nashville shooter, they still haven't released her manifesto. And let's just say that whole situation, there was a lot of nasty stuff going on there, including possible sexual abuse within that private school. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to get off on that rabbit trail. That's a whole other incident. But the reality is that the establishment covers up this stuff. And, evil festers in darkness. If you want to eradicate it, the first step's shining a light on it. And I think it's a mistake for the establishment, for law enforcement, for politicians to say the public can't handle the truth and to keep it to themselves. It protects the bad actors, is what it does. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe the state and these politicians and law enforcement, maybe they're intentionally trying to protect the bad actors. Maybe they're trying to protect these murderous trans individuals. By the way, so Kirk was being asked this question: do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years? And the person asking that question then gave him the answer, because Kirk didn't have the exact answer, I don't think. And that individual said, if I recall correctly, 5, which is not correct, by the way. The number is actually higher than that. But again, it's like trying to always lie and slant the narrative, and keep pushing the agenda. But I don't think the timing of the shooter killing Kirk when that question was being asked, I don't think that's a coincidence. And anyway, let's keep on rolling here. So observers saying that a lot of activity around the house within a couple weeks. Yeah, like I said, report states that one of the groups deleted their social media. These people are scrubbing, trying to erase their tracks. And then just, people saving posts that people celebrating. We effing did it. Obviously, they knew that something was happening and had just gotten word that it had been, the killing of Charlie Kirk had been accomplished. There are people with foreknowledge of that. Here's another. This was interesting as well. This person here, Omar. Charlie Kirk is coming to my college tomorrow. Really hope someone evaporates him literally. And then let's just say something big will happen tomorrow. And this seems to be a trans person as well, going from other people digging into it. Seems to be. You guys, I have something big coming soon, but just be sure to check the news. You'll know it when you see it. And by the way, some of these trans people are, one's a teacher. One of these individuals in the mix is a teacher. Another individual saying something big coming soon. Oh, yeah, okay, I think we hit that already. Anyway, I'm not necessarily going to go through all this stuff these nasty people are putting out there. Using groups like Discord and Steam to coordinate and communicate, and then realizing when it actually happened, oh boy, yeah, we'd better start using encrypted communications because they're going to start looking for us at this point. Anyway. I think we've hit all the highlights. Let's look at a couple other things as we go through here. Some things I want to mention. There's a lot of different stories. Obviously, over the last few days, there's been a ton of stories on the Gateway Pundit and all over everywhere about Charlie Kirk. The man's legacy and impact was very far-reaching. There's a few specific, Governor Cox, I believe he's the governor of Utah, and Charlie Kirk was very critical of him. Actually, you can see from the screen cap, Utah Governor Spencer Cox should be expelled from the Republican Party. Republican Governor Spencer Cox is refusing to protect women's sports. He's signaling he will pander to the trans lobby to continue the destruction of children. Why? He's likely being paid off by Big Pharma, who make billions off hormone blockers and chemical castration. And this is why I asked the question, how far does this go? These trans individuals at the ground level, they're just the foot soldiers. Are they being manipulated by people in the government, people in politics, people in Big Pharma? Who's pulling the strings here? We need to investigate all this stuff, and especially in light of this, which is real interesting. Cox keeps coming out and saying, oh, we got him, it was a lone shooter. And now that we absolutely know that, uh, I think it was actually Cox who was putting out the idea too that that the shooter was a right wing extremist. And now that we know that they lived with a trans lover, probably, he's just constantly running interference and trying to cover up that there was almost certainly, oh, well, there had to have been, with all the foreknowledge, there was more than one person involved, for sure. And there was also communications about things like stashing the weapon and some other coordination type things. So it's known at this point that there are several people involved here, and many of them are trans. This guy is running interference, and at the very least, I would argue that, making irresponsible statements like that are absolutely false, that is, interference in the investigation. I think that that's a crime in and of itself. Intentionally spreading disinformation for the sake of a political agenda, um, and I think this is also why Democrats move against FBI Director Kash Patel after Charlie Kirk's murder. Planned congressional hearings next week. They don't want the FBI involved. Like I said, a lot of the investigation and stuff has been handled at the state level and local law enforcement upwards, and that's the way they want it, because I think that there is an effort in on those levels to conceal the trans connection here. From the governor on down, they're trying to cover up that there was more, that it was not just a lone shooter. They're trying to keep that under wraps, and that's why I'm making this video. I want to highlight some of this stuff. I want to make people aware of it. And so if they, start telling us, oh, it was just a lone shooter, that's all it was, we got him, we're good. No, that's not how it was, and we want the whole truth. We want all the answers. We want all the accountable parties held accountable, and that includes not just the foot soldiers, but the handlers and those who are, if there's any people using MK Ultra style mind programming or blackmail or any other, manipulative technologies or tactics to control people and to orchestrate this, they need to be held accountable too. But this is why there's now this effort to just stir up chaos amongst the ranks of the FBI right now, because they really don't want the FBI interjecting itself into this investigation. Because that's really gonna, if they're trying to suppress all this stuff about this militant trans cell, the last thing they want is the FBI going in there and opening up that whole can of worms. And so I think they're really going to be there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of, I guess you could call it, strings attached to Charlie Kirk's murder that need to be unraveled, and we need to follow those strings and those breadcrumb trails to their full conclusion and get the truth. And that's all I have to say about this. You guys have a good one.